531 VI.
It is 7:32. This is Pacific Mornings. I'm William Twetti. It's brilliant to have your company. Thank you very much for joining us. Hoping you're having a lovely start to your morning, by the way. Now, Minister for Customs Casey Costello has just wrapped up a visit to Fiji, the second Pacific Island nation she's visited in the past month. Now, her trip included meetings with senior Fijian ministers and officials to strengthen regional cooperation on customs, border security, and transnational crime. She's also visited ports, airports, and community organisations to see firsthand the work being done on the ground. Minister Costello joins us now to talk about the outcomes of her visit and what it means for New Zealand's partnership with Fiji and the wider Pacific region. Kia ora, Minister. Thank you for your time.
Kia ora, Bulavanaka.
Yes, indeed. Hey, look, we'll start with an obvious question in terms of what were some of the key outcomes, say, from your engagements with Deputy Prime Minister Biman Prasad and other Fijian ministers?
It was really positive engagement. One of the vulnerabilities we have across the Pacific nations is, which is the purpose of all of this work, is around the organised crime and the infiltration into communities. And what was really encouraging was the high level of understanding, commitment to doing more, to strengthening response. I think there has been a hesitancy around saying we've got a problem. What I found was the ministers were really engaged about understanding that there is real harm being done to their most vulnerable communities, exactly the same as we're finding in New Zealand. So that was really encouraging, not just that they were talking about it, but they understood what the issues were and they'd taken the time and commitment to look into what are the challenges facing their borders and their people.
Mm. With that in mind, I suppose, how would you describe the current state of customs cooperation between New Zealand and Fiji in terms of what new areas of collaboration are being explored?
So at the moment, one of the most positive areas, which was on the ground meeting with customs workers, was customs does a lot of work around leadership development training. So really taking frontline workers and over a 2-year program, building up the ability. And I think it's that cultural hesitancy about being a decision maker, that kind of that hierarchical kind of respect structure that makes you a bit reluctant to make a call. So there's been a lot of work, and this is going back 12 or 13 years this program's been running, and there's frontline workers who are now in the senior management of customs, revenue and customs in Fiji, who are continuing to be advanced because of their training, development and support that customs did. So the two of the customs team that were deliver the training were over there while I was over there, so I got to meet with them and meet with people who are currently in the program or have been in the program in the recent years. So that was a really good one. We also do a lot of work, police and customs, around the dog detection training program. So we had the first female Fijian customs dog handler. I met with her. So those dogs are trained and supported through New Zealand, and then they get deployed into Fiji. So the dog kennel that was built and staffed by Fijian police and customs. And then on the ground, there's a lot of work around operational enforcement. So the uncrewed surface vessels that Customs launched with the Navy were actually up in Fiji, working with the Fijian Navy while we were there. So they were out patrolling, learning on the technologies that we've got and how that, with the number of island nations that make up Fiji, a number of islands that make up Fiji, it was really important to strengthen their maritime response. So, really positive, practical stuff on the ground was really great to see.
Fantastic. In terms of, in light of growing concerns around, say, transnational crime, right? How are New Zealand and Fiji working together to strengthen border security, particularly at maritime ports and airports? If you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so that's a really, first of all, there is the strengthening from a security perspective, understanding the vulnerabilities. One of the parts which was discussed at length was the sharing of information, the proactive sharing of information. we have to protect our island partners because that is the gateway to our countries, and that was what was really recognised in Fiji. So it's the on-the-ground capability, security development, security planning, and also legislation. We're doing Customs is doing a piece of work with Tonga at the moment, developing their customs and excise legislation. We hope to continue to do that work with Fiji around how they, because the part with customs is that we also collect revenue, and from Fiji relies heavily on revenue collected at the border, and so that is why it's really critical to get those processes right. So if we balance trade and development with strengthening the border, you get the two wins, and that was the big part of understanding how that can work better together. Really good. We have a Pacific liaison individual that travels between New Zealand and all of the Pacific nations. Hayden has a fantastic on-the-ground relationship with the frontline team, developing security response, security capability, CCTV surveillance, training around the X-ray, the use of the drug dogs, all of those sort of practical and on-the-ground stuff. So it was great to see that kind of real close engagement with our customs team at the front line and the Fiji Revenue and Customs staff as well.
Oh, okay. And just shifting attention perhaps slightly, when you were last on the show, I suppose something that really caught our audience's attention was your point about the rise of human trafficking in the Pacific. Could you give us an update, or perhaps how bad is the situation really?
I think there's a couple of things that are really frightening around the trafficking component is the appreciation that trafficking is not just across borders, it's domestic as well. And what was frightening, I met with Empower Pacific while I was in Nandi, and Patrick Morgan is the chief executive there. And one of the things they're seeing with the impact of growing drug organised crime, drug dependency, the enormous impact of methamphetamine into Fiji itself, was the risk of domestic trafficking. So, in order to pay debts, people are being moved from the outer islands, being moved around. So there's not just a cross-border trafficking, there's domestic trafficking as well, where people are being effectively sold or traded to pay off debts. And that's that human cost that's really hard for people to see or even appreciate. And that's a horrible reality around what we've got, why the strengthening our cooperation, strengthening our borders and responding to organised crime because of the huge human cost that's being paid by our most vulnerable.
Are there any particular routes, countries, or demographics being targeted more frequently by this behaviour?
Unfortunately, no. Like, it's wherever there's a legitimate trade route, there is risk of illicit trade occurring. And what is encouraging is that for a long time, this wasn't something that was talked about. And one of the things around organised crime, which is really important, and I hope we can get your audience to understand, is when we're talking about organised crime, they're a business entity. They are a big criminal business enterprise, and we have to be a little bit agnostic about what the commodity is, because they will trade in what they can make profit on. And whether that's people, whether that's money laundering, whether that's drugs, this is the reason why we have to strengthen our borders, strengthen our response, and control the illicit activity. And the easiest way to control that illicit activity is control the movement of money. And there is a whole piece of work around how we can do that better and how we can share information better. And that was what was encouraging with Fiji as well, that they are really keen to ensure that we share information and understand more about who's moving around, who's doing the activity that generates risk. But yeah, unfortunately, there is no, okay, we can close this area and that will solve the problem. Unfortunately, the nature of illicit activity is where we have legitimate trade, they will follow in the weak links to get in behind it.
Wow. Okay. And you touched on it there, but perhaps if you could dive a bit deeper in terms of what role New Zealand is playing in addressing trafficking across Pacific borders?
So we have a dedicated team within immigration, which is what we call irregular migration. So, and that covers all of those aspects of, um, trafficking to exploitation, all of those components. But trafficking is a unique component. So we do have a dedicated team, an investigation team. It is a really complex area of law. And so therefore it's hard to get prosecutions over the line because generally the perpetrators aren't here to prosecute. So the biggest program of work, and I met with a lot of the NGOs that work in this space just last week, was how do we provide a better mechanism through which to report a lot of the vulnerability is because the victims are unlikely to report because of the vulnerable situation. So it's getting society, civil society, to understand what to look for, how to appreciate what's going on. If you think back just a few years ago, the prosecution of Matamata for slavery in the Hawke's Bay, there was a lot of learning from that where people identified that, oh, those, I did notice they were really isolated or we didn't get to engage with them. Understanding what are those things to look for and understand who the vulnerable people are is probably one of the biggest pieces of work. Plus, we're doing some legislative work around ensuring that the penalties are even across all of those people harm type offendings. And there's been a real, inconsistency around how we've investigated and responded to those offences.
Right. Finally, just two more questions for you. Just on Blue Bottle and its role in the Pacific, I suppose, how effective have the Blue Bottle uncrewed surface vessels been in helping monitor Fiji's exclusive economic zone and, combat illegal activity?
It's very early at this stage, and it's if you understand so there's the Maritime Essential Services Centre, the MESC, that was set up. So that's only recently been established and hasn't actually been officially opened, and that will be the centre by which they monitor activity. That's a massive investment for Fiji, but also upskilling all of the whether it's Navy, whether it's maritime, whether it's civil aviation, whether it's customs, how they co-locate. So there's a lot of monitoring and skill to be learned about how this technology works, and that's even down to the right internet. So it's very early days. The trial up there has been around training and skilling and understanding the because of the number of craft and boats and the number of locations they can port at across the Fiji Islands, it's building that awareness of who's coming and being able to see boat activity, but also being able to see, from a maritime response rescue kind of component as well. So it's really early days. I know that the activity that we've been able to see in New Zealand using Blue Bottle has been brilliant, really proactive. And I think the logic behind this is when you have limited resource, you have to be able to manage where your workload goes. So you profile, you risk assess, and you respond to the highest risk components rather than trying to cover the whole ocean as a scattergun approach. And that's really what the Blue Bottle is going to be doing, is early information to allow them to respond more targeted ways.
Yeah. A final question for you, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. I think you're heading off to Samoa, right?
Yeah, we're trying to, but that pesky election thing gets in the way. So
Yeah.
we have to wait till after the election. Last year I did with Minister Peters, went to the Solomon Islands to Nauru and Niue. So that was really interesting as well, very different kind of issues and challenges. But yeah, we're hoping to get to Samoa after the elections, again, just building those relationships.
Why this heavy focus on strengthening relationships between New Zealand and the Pacific now? Dare I ask, is it because of the geopolitical tensions?
No, it's from my perspective, this work. I mean, as you've been aware, Minister Peters has been very closely engaged across the Pacific since he took on this role. for me, it's my focus has purely been around the transnational and serious organised crime, and that's the focus we've seen. I started this work when I set up the Ministerial Advisory Group last year on serious and organised crime, and we recognise that we have effectively a shared border. And you saw in Fiji last year they had 4.2 tonnes of methamphetamine intercepted. Those are the things that show that we are, or the islands will be, a gateway to New Zealand and Australian crime markets. So that's really my focus.
Mm. Minister Casey Costello, thank you very much for your time. You have a good rest of your day, eh?
Thank you very much.
You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 5:31 PI. We'll have that full interview up on our Facebook page if you'd like to check it out. I'll be back with you in just a moment, though. Stick around.
T'es mon ami, reste ici, va pas là-bas.